What's up, guys, and welcome back to MoAn Inc. If you guys are new here, then hello! My name is Erica, and it is a pleasure to have you joining me today on the channel. Because for today's video, as you can see from the title, we are going to be chatting about and summarizing Women at the Thesmophoria by Aristophanes. But before we can get into that, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you know every single time I post in the future. And now that you've so kindly done that, let's get into the video. The play opens with the scene setting, and in this particular play, we have a street in Athens presented to us. So the first character to walk on stage is Euripides. Yes, that Euripides. And he is clearly looking for a particular house on this street. Now, along with looking for a house, he is also waiting for a companion to join him on stage. And as he's sort of looking around, we finally get this gentleman walk on, and he is an older relative of Euripides's. So his name is Masilochus. He is basically like Euripides' tag team for this. And Euripides, when he came on stage, he very much looked as if he had been walking and searching for this house for a while. And this is only confirmed when the older gentleman comes on, because he has been lagging behind. He is not as stealthy as Euripides, and he is huffing and puffing, exhausted from their search. Masilochus tells us that he has been walking for ages and ages, and he asks Euripides why they've been walking for so long. He doesn't know where they're going. He just kind of hopped on the bandwagon without asking too many questions. So now he wants to open this up. And Euripides turns around and tells him to shush, tells him to be quiet, because he points to the house in front of them and lets us know that that is where the tragedian Agathon lives. Now, just a note about this play, we do have lots of famous characters, lots of famous people show up, including obviously Euripides. I will not be explaining who anybody is for the purpose of this video because we will be here all day. So if you need any of that analysis, I would highly suggest either buying the work or just Googling analysis of this play in order to kind of get that context. But Agathon is a person who's like a real person. He's a character who's a real person, much like Euripides is in this play. So Euripides tells us that they have been looking for Agathon's house, and now they are standing in front of it. As the two men are talking, the doors to Agathon's house swing open, and we are met with a servant. Not Agathon, just a servant in the doorway. But this is enough to spook Euripides and Masilochus, and Euripides grabs onto Masilochus and they hide so that the servant doesn't see them. Now the servant comes out to make prayers to the gods and offerings to the gods, specifically to the muses. But this whole scene would have just been incredibly funny to the audience because the language that the servant uses in the ancient Greek is ludicrous. Okay, most of you guys are going to have to just trust me on this one. But the point of this is to make fun of tragedy. So Aristophanes is making fun of both Euripides and Agathon in this scene. And the way that this servant speaks is so pompous and so ridiculous as he's making these offerings to the muse that even Euripides and Masilochus, from where they're hiding, are occasionally like chiming out, being like, what drivel? How ridiculous? Why is he speaking this way? So they're acknowledging how silly this scene is. But as they're making all of these comments, obviously the servant kind of hears them. So the servant keeps getting interrupted and will turn around being like, who goes there? What's that? And in response to all of this, Euripides and Masilochus are kind of like, it's just the wind. Yeah, the wind. And the servant like keeps going until this gets too much. And finally the servant drops the whole making the prayers to the muses thing because Agathon is like right about to finish sort of setting up his next tragedy. So he kind of gives up though with all of these prayers to the muses to hope that this comes to fruition and that it is as great as they hope it will be. And he turns around to the direction of where the voices are coming from and he's like, okay, I know that there is somebody by the wall. Who are you? What are you doing here? Euripides and Masilochus come out of hiding and Euripides walks right up to the servant and asks him if he can go inside and get Agathon out because Euripides has some words and he wants to chat to Agathon. And the servant in reply says, no need to ask. He's coming out any minute now to do some composing. It's the wintry weather, not easy to bend the stanzas into shape. He has to bring them out into the sun. And then the servant goes into the house. When the servant leaves, Euripides looks very, very stressed, okay, to everybody, including Masilochus. And Masilochus turns to him and says, what are you so stressed about? We seem to be having a nice day, nice long walk. We got some fresh air. What's the big deal? And Euripides tells him that today is the day that he finds out if he lives or he dies. right? Very, very dramatic. To which Masilochus is like, okay, but the courts don't meet today, so like, what are you talking about? To which Euripides says, it's not the courts, it's the women. And today is the day at the Thesmophoria where they will vote on my downfall. They've been plotting against me for a long time, and now is the moment that it all comes down to. Masilochus asks why the women would be bothered with this, in particular why they would be bothered, too many B's, why they would be bothered with this at the Thesmophoria, which is a women's only religious festival. Like, why would they fuss with Euripides? And Euripides says that it's because he, for such a long time, has basically been dragging them in his tragedies, and they've had enough. Okay, they don't want any more of this language coming from Euripides, coming from the theatre, and so today they've decided to put an end to it. Masilochus agrees that Euripides has been being rude about women, and so therefore he's kind of like, well, what's the plan then? Because you have been doing these things, you can't just go in and be like, oh no, that wasn't me. Yes, it was. So is there a plan, or are you just here to like complain about it? And Euripides tells us that his great grand plan is to convince Agathon, the guy whose house they are currently outside of, to go into the Thesmophoria and to defend him, because Agathon's a really good speaker. Now, like I said, the Thesmophoria is a women's only festival. So this is sort of the one caveat that Euripides has, is also that he needs Agathon to go in, but to dress up like a woman and pretend to be a woman so that he can say his piece at the Thesmophoria and convince the women not to drag and kill Euripides, right? Not to punish him, right? That's the whole point. And he thinks that Agathon is the best man for the job. Right on cue, after Euripides tells us this, Agathon appears outside the house. He is clean shaven, he's wearing a wig, he's in full-on women's clothing, and the actor would have had on a white female mask. Now, again, a little caveat. When we hear a white female mask, that has nothing to do with skin color. That has to do with indoor-outdoor things. I'm not going to get into that, but that's not a skin color reference. That's a sunlight reference. Sounds so weird if you don't know the ancient world. But anyways, he would be wearing a white female mask, and he then comes on stage and he sits in front of sort of like a vanity. What's another word for that? Oh, a dressing table is that's a much better one. Now, when Agathon appears, Euripides has a moment of being like, oh, there's Agathon, now's my time to shine. And Masilochus turns around to where Euripides has motioned and goes, where? I don't see him. And in his pretty outfit, Agathon starts to sing in this moment. Now, again, this would have been comical because Agathon is singing as if he's the chorus, but he's singing both parts of the chorus and the chorus leader. And so he has this very long song. It's not all that important what it's about, but he has this little display, shall we call it? Performance, even better. And Masilochus, as he's listening, says that although Agathon's voice is beautiful, he doesn't actually know if he's looking at a man or a woman because the voice is so beautiful and the appearance is of a woman. However, it's giving like manly vibes and his body is giving manly vibes. So he's a little confused and he kind of like taps Euripides on the shoulder and he's like, what's going on? And before Euripides can reply, Agathon actually tells us, and he says that he is essentially method acting. He's got this show coming up, this theatre performance coming up. For one of his tragedies, he wants to write the part of these women, and so therefore he believes that unless you can kind of put yourself in the position of your characters, you can't write them correctly. And therefore, because he's writing a female character, he has decided that this is now his new appearance and his new life until he finishes the play. The exact quote from Agathon reads, old man, I sense a note of envy in your reproach, yet I will not be riled. I wear my clothes to suit my inspiration. A poet has to merge his personality with what he is portraying. If he shows a woman's actions, he must participate in her experience, mind, body, and soul. And in response, Masilochus says, so if you wrote about Phaedra, would you assume the straddling position? Oh God. To which Agathon says, if one writes about a man, one already has all the bits and pieces, as it were. But what nature does not provide, art must imitate. And Masilochus says, let me know if you're writing a satire play, and I'll come and help by ramming you from behind. So this is very crude, play. It is like literally as I'm even reading it, when I was reading it in preparation for this episode, I'm reading it when I was in school, and you are giggling just reading it. You don't even need to go and see it. I know this is considered like lowbrow humor from the ancient Greek perspective, this kind of like slapstick humor, but this is funny. It's so outrageous that you're like, if I don't laugh, I'm gonna cringe. So therefore I'm going to laugh. But anyways, not the point of this. Euripides interrupts this and he tells Agathon about the Thesmophoria and about his plan. And another quote from him is the reason why he wants Agathon to go is because he believes that no one but him can make a speech worthy of Euripides in his defense. And I know what you might be wondering. You might be thinking, why doesn't Euripides just do this? If he wants Agathon to dress up as a woman and to break into the Thesmophoria, why can't he just do that himself? And Euripides does tell us why. He says that the reason why he is not doing it is because he's too famous as is. So he said even if he got into a disguise, people would still recognize him. He is that noticeable at this point in his life. And actually, to our surprise, Agathon says no. Right, so we have the beginning part of the play and Agathon just turns to him and goes, no, actually, I want nothing to do with this crazy plan. And so Masilochus steps in and he says, I'm old too, but people don't know who I am. I can claim, a good story and I can go in there and I can defend you. I know you really well. Let's go. I'm ready. Euripides realizes that beggars cannot be choosers. So he's thrilled that somebody is willing to go. And so he tells Masilochus how thankful he is and then sits him down to get him ready because you've got to womanify him now to go into this women's only festival. So the first thing that they have to do is shave his face. Now, bear in mind, in ancient Greece, having like facial hair is like the ultimate manly thing that a man can do. Okay, there are like lots of these things. So to shave that off immediately, that would have been funny to the audience, but also the fact that Euripides sits him down, borrows a razor from Agathon, and he only gets through one cheek before Masilochus stands up and he's like, nope, can't do this. I lied. But Euripides manages to convince him to sit back down. He finishes the other cheek and then puts a mirror up to Masilochus and is like, look, you look so pretty now. You're such like a little baby face. And Masilochus is just so shocked by his appearance that he just throws the mirror away. He's like, I can't do it. I'm going to do this thing for you, but don't make me look at myself. Then we have the pinnacle of humor in this scene. Again, slapstick humor, this quote unquote for the ancient Greeks low brow humor. Come on, Erica. Whereby a slave servant emerges from the house, from Agathon's house, and brings out a torch. And this is when we have Masilochus bend over so that Euripides can, how am I going to say this for YouTube? Clean him up down there, right? So we have this whole scene where he brings the torch to singe the area. Once they're done, we have the final bit of this beautifying process. And that is that Euripides asks Agathon if they can borrow one of his dresses, because Agathon, like we have just established, he is now living as a woman so that he can write this play correctly. So he's got a great wardrobe, right? So they turn around, they're like, hey, can we borrow one of your dresses? And Agathon is like, for sure, take your pick, please. So they pick a yellow gown. And in addition to this, Agathon then offers them a matching shawl and shoes so that we have the nice complete outfit. Oh, and a wig. He does offer a wig so that way we have like a nice sort of new version of Masilochus, a new pretty version of Masilochus. And now that he is looking like he just came out of RuPaul's Drag Race, Agathon bids his farewells and he goes back inside to leave Euripides and Masilochus alone on stage. The last thing to do before Masilochus goes to the Thesmophoria is that he makes Euripides swear that if anything goes wrong, if he needs him to do anything at all, that Euripides will come to his aid. It's very much like he's going into war or something. He's like, you can't leave me alone in there. If I need you to come, you better come. And Euripides agrees. And right as he agrees, we start hearing women's voices off stage. And as the whispers and the voices grow louder and louder, Euripides runs off stage and we have a scene change to now the Thesmophoria. In the orchestra area is now an altar, and the women pour onto the stage and immediately go around there to leave their offerings to the deities that they are going to be honoring. All of these women are our chorus. Well, most of these women are our chorus because they also include Mika. How are we saying that? I, again, being taught this in the UK, was taught that it was Micah. Sometimes I hear people say Mika online. I think that you can just say either. Just stick to one, as long as we all spell it the same. That's the most important thing. I will probably switch between the two because I tend to do that. So she comes on stage, a second woman comes on stage, and along with Micah, we also have her two maids. One of them is holding a baby. Okay, so this is the crowd that comes in, and the women at the Thesmophoria, as with all Aristophanes' plays, this is the chorus, right? So the majority of them, like I said, are the chorus. That's why the play is called what it is. And as they all come on, we sort of have Basilicus kind of go off to come back on, right? Because now he comes on as a woman at the Thesmophoria, and he hilariously, as he's dressed up as a woman, realizes that everyone has like a slave or a servant with them. And so he just kind of starts talking at the air as if he has one as well. So this slave servant is totally imaginary, and he names her Thrata, which would have been a really popular name at the time. So he's kind of like, come along, Thrata, let's drop these offerings at the altar, just like everybody else. Oh, just there, yes, please. Like literally just talking at, at nothing. He then makes a public display of sending her away after they leave. No offering, actually. He says leave an offering at the altar, but obviously he didn't bring anything because he didn't know that that's what's done at the Thesmophoria because it's a women's only thing. Ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous scene, but he sends off his imaginary maid and does it really loudly so that everybody can hear that, oh, Thrata, go home! Thanks so much for this! Ha 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 ha! The chorus and the women take their seats, and Basilicus realizes that this is, part of the ceremony, and so he goes to sit down with them. The first thing that happens is the chorus leader leads everybody in this incredibly long prayer to Demeter and Persephone. I mean, it is absurdly long. However, once this finishes, which thank God it does, because it feels like at one point it's never ending. Like even as you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, we're still going, guys. When we finish, the chorus leader wants to get down to business, and they turn to the rest of the women. She turns to the rest of the women and she's like, okay, what are we gonna do about punishing that Euripides? Mika stands up first and she gives a really long speech about why they should punish Euripides. And she says that it's because the women don't really do anything, like women are just kind of existing, and Euripides has plotted all of these ideas in men's head that women are like manipulating them or planning to poison them or kill them or all of these other crazy things that happen in his plays, which then cause men to be more paranoid about their wives. And so she's kind of like, we need to stop this man because all of our husbands keep coming home and they're looking in the cupboards for things and they're judging us, and anytime we want to go and do anything by ourselves, they don't trust us. Like, this was fine before Euripides started putting all of this weird in their heads about the things that we get up to. And so we just need to get rid of him. One of my favorite lines from her speech is, and I didn't write down the line number, of course I didn't. However, it reads, and what happened to all the rich men who used to marry young girls? Euripides has put them off completely with his, an old man weds a tyrant, not a wife. Dead, dying. Honestly, I agree with Mika completely. Where are the rich old men? Look at what Euripides has done. Just finish him. Like, just get rid of him. Now, like I said, this is a very long speech, and at the end of it, she sort of closes it off by basically saying, I'll write up a longer speech and one with more detailed points and more like quotes and analysis later, and I'll send it to all of you, because the one that she just delivered apparently wasn't detailed enough. It's an entire page, you guys, of just dialogue that she says. But no, not enough detail. Honestly, as the person that does these summaries, I think I kind of am Mika in this moment. Like, I just really identify with her. How many videos have I uploaded? Summary of, and they're like an hour long. Anyways, after this, Mika returns her speaking garland. I definitely didn't mention that she has a speaking garland. So at the Thesmophoria in this play, they have a speaking garland that they pass around to the person who's speaking. You can't interrupt them. It's that sort of idea. And so she gives back the speaking garland to the chorus, and then she sits down in her seat. Everybody's clapping and applauding her. The chorus saying how well she's done. And this is then when the second woman, who I mentioned earlier, she stands up and requests the garland. So when she stands up to speak, she tells us her story. And her story is that she is a single mother of 5 children. Already, I'm like, honey, sit down. We'll do whatever you need. Her husband died years before in Cyprus, and so therefore she has to make all the money, right? And when she does, she sells these things at the market. However, because of what Euripides has been saying, and he flirts with this idea that there are no gods, she sells these like myrtle sort of offerings, and people aren't buying from her anymore. So she is really having to hustle out there to make ends meet and to put food on the table. And that's her main motivation for wanting to get rid of Euripides, because he's been making people question the gods and not want to buy all of these things, that she's like, how am I supposed to provide? She sits down, returns the garland, people are cheering for her, and this is when Masilochus stands up. Oh yes, this is now his time to shine. Remember that he is there in disguise as a woman to defend Euripides because he knows that all of them want to punish Euripides. They want to get rid of him. So he stands up to give his great speech, and he makes it like 10 times worse. He gets up there and he basically says to all of them that he, much like them, doesn't like Euripides. However, Euripides technically isn't lying. Like, why did he think this was going to go over well? I'm just so curious about this character's mentality. Like, what? He comes up with this completely bogus story about how because he's a wife, right? Before he was married, he hooked up with this guy, and now when her husband is, I don't know how I'm supposed to refer to Masilochus, but Masilochus in disguise now has a husband. Whenever it's like super late at night and there's a knock at the door, he will get up from bed. They will get up from bed and go downstairs so that they can hook up with this hookup that they had before they were married, but not tell the husband. So cheating on the husband the whole time. And Masilochus is like, oh, I do things like the stuff that Euripides writes about. And so therefore we can't really hate him for what he's written because what he's written is true. He then says that the women should really be grateful for what Euripides doesn't write about and all the tricks that they have up their sleeves of how they manipulate men and how they just sort of run rampant, apparently, that Euripides doesn't know about, and so therefore he's not telling men about that. And that's his great grand speech. Obviously, the chorus, completely shocked. They literally say, and I quote, "Where did this creature come from?" Honestly, exactly what I was thinking. Micah is also so mad at this, and she says, are we just gonna let this Looney Tune insult us like this? Obviously, that's not an exact quote, but essentially that's what she says. Micah decides that the punishment for Masilochus in disguise is that they are going to... No, I can definitely say this on YouTube without affecting my monetization. We're gonna find out together as a family, but literally she wants to pluck and singe this woman who's actually a guy's bush. Right, that's the insult that she decides, and Masilochus is like, no, not my bush! And Masilochus tries to say that this is a space for women to speak, and they all have the right to free speech, so technically, they are allowed to say whatever they want, but obviously Micah is having none of this, okay? She is super mad, and they end up in this back and forth that gets really heated and nearly ends up in a physical fight. Like, that is how angry Micah is, but also how annoyed Masilochus is for not being able to speak. Though, again, to be fair, he didn't have that much time to prepare. Why didn't Euripides prepare him better for this? Why would you send him in if this was the risk that would happen? Anyways. But like I said, the argument nearly turns physical, okay? It's very like white chicks hold my poodle kind of vibes. Like they're getting in each other's faces. They're like, I'm ready to go. But luckily a newcomer shows up and interrupts this scene. This newcomer is not a woman, but is in fact Cleisthenes, who is also dressed up as a woman. This is a topical reference that the audience would have found funny. I'm not going to explain it here. So he hurries in, super breathless, but also very, very excited. Now, what news does he bring to the women? When he shows up, he stands in the middle of the stage and he says, guys, I was just downtown and I heard that Euripides has sent a man to this festival to defend himself, and he's currently dressed up as a woman. So watch your back, but oh my god, how exciting that this is happening too! The chorus initially push back on this. So the chorus leader is kind of like, do you really think that a man would dress up to begin with to come into this festival. And Cleisthenes is very much saying, this is what I've heard from multiple people, like we need to take this very seriously. And so the chorus turn to all of the women, the chorus leader turns to all of the women even, and tells them that it is now their duty to find out who this man is. Okay, there is somebody who's in a women's only festival. This is not his space. Get him out. Naturally, Masilochus bricks. Okay, he wants out, and he starts like backing away really slowly from the scene, like sort of like Kronk in The Emperor's New Groove when he goes up against the wall and he's like, ah. That is essentially what Masilochus starts doing, because he does not want to be caught. He's scared of the women, okay? Every man in this play is scared of these women, and he is very much in the lion's den and wants to back out without them noticing. Obviously, much like Kronk, he's not very subtle about this. Cleisthenes turns around and sees him and is like, where are you going? To which Masilochus says that he just needs to pee. And Cleisthenes is like, okay, well, if you need to pee, then I'm coming with you. And obviously, Masilochus is like, no, that's really, really weird. You can't come to the loo with me. And Cleisthenes is like, actually, I get what you're saying, so I won't. So while Cleisthenes waits, the chorus leader tells him to really look out at this newcomer because it's the only person at the Thesmophoria that none of them really know personally. So they have their eyes already zeroed in on Masilochus, meaning that when he returns from the loo, the questioning begins. The first couple of questions are about Masilochus as a wife, right? So they want to know who his husband is. They want to know where they live. They want to know what the husband's job is. And obviously, Masilochus can't answer a single one of these questions. He is literally saying silly things like, what's a majig and who's his name? And all of these silly non-committal responses that obviously have the women going, right, okay, so this is definitely our guy. And just to hit the point home, Mika starts asking him loads of questions about the Thesmophoria itself. And there is sort of a silly back and forth here where as she's asking about the rites and about all of these things, he just frequently answers by mentioning wine or by mentioning drinking and how like the first thing that they do is drink and then afterwards they drink and she's kind of like, who told you all of that? Which is again supposed to be silly and sexist, but that's not the point. But as you can guess, this is enough for the women to really pinpoint and out Masilochus. And so what they do is they remove his girdle and therefore the top of his dress actually falls so that Cleisthenes and Mika can look at his chest to inspect that he doesn't have any boobs, right? So that's the first thing where they're like, oop, here we go. Except he's still clutching the bottom part of his dress. Like that's the part where he's like, oop, nope. But Cleisthenes manages to rip this part away from him so that way they can inspect his lower half is what we're going to say so that this video doesn't get censored even. Spencered. He would have been wearing a giant prosthetic phallus though, just that you guys know. So this would have been very obvious, very silly comedy in that way. And actually, as they're trying to inspect him, this giant phallus would have been moving in between his legs. So they'd be like, oh, well, where is it? Maybe he is a woman. And they kind of like pull it back. And then when one of them goes back and they're like, oh, no, it's here. And the other one comes back to see it from behind. It would have moved forward. Like, so it's this very silly scene where they're basically saying, is he a man? Is this the guy that we need? With this giant, like huge prosthetic phallus. But as this is happening, Masilochus has a moment where he just looks out to the audience and he goes, this is really a mess that I found myself in. Cleisthenes declares that this is enough for him to go to the council to let them know, because again, this is a women's protected space, and so therefore he can't be there. This is literally punishable as a crime. And so he tells the women, but also in particular Micah, to look out to guard, shall we say, Masilochus before he returns with the council members or with whoever he needs in order to punish Masilochus. So as he leaves then, we have Mika sit down to guard Masilochus, and we have the chorus that prepare for their torch dance. The chorus sing a little, they go to the altar to light the torches, they sing a little bit more, they dance with the torches, right? This is like a whole ceremonious thing that they're doing. But what's important to note is that, like I said, at the start of this whole Thesmophoria scene, we had Mika show up with one of her maids holding a baby. So now Mika's holding the baby, and as she's sitting there holding this thing, we have Masilochus, who is really like sitting there plotting of how to escape, okay? Because he's like, I'm now in deep shit. How do I get out of this? And his brain decides that in a bid to get out of this, he grabs Mika's baby, like just grabs it out of her hands and runs towards the altar. This obviously causes a massive fiasco, okay? Not only is Mika screaming at him because she's like, that is my literal baby, what are you doing? But also the chorus are getting involved, everybody's trying to get to him, Masilicus is threatening that he's going to harm the baby, and as he's doing this, we see this little like aside moment where he pulls back the fabric and he realizes that he is not, in fact, holding a baby. He is holding a wineskin. So Mika, again, we are just leaning into women use this festival as just like a private drinking space because they're like, fuck men, we can go and have our great time here. And so Mika has disguised a wineskin as a baby, put like little Persian booties on it and everything so that she can just get hammered at this festival. As I mentioned though, this is an aside. So no one sees this happen. The audience see it. Masilicus speaks out and is like, oh my God, this is not actually a baby. This is crazy. But the people on stage don't know this. And so Mika and her maids, they start saying that they're going to burn him alive because he has the baby. They're just like, this has gotten too far. You can't take my baby. And they disappear off stage to go and get like kindling to bring back on. So when they come back on, and now we're all in the know that this is just wine, Masilicus starts to use this as leverage. Okay, so when they come back on, he starts asking questions about the baby, and obviously Mika is answering them as if the baby is real. So Masilicus starts to bump up the ante, right? So he basically starts saying, well, I'm gonna slaughter your baby then. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And Mika's like, no, not my child. But Masilicus anyways raises a knife above the baby, right? And he's like, I'm gonna do it, wanting Mika to, say that she's insane. And she won't. In fact, she asks if she can just grab a bowl so that as he slaughters the baby, she can gather up the blood of the baby. And so she does that. But when Masilicus stabs this wineskin, he actually leans down to drink everything so that way none of the blood comes out. And literally, Mika does not. I'm kind of obsessed with her. Like, she doesn't give up anything in this scene. Like, literally, as he does this, she calls him names. She's like, how could you? Can't even let me gather up the blood of my child. Like, will not accept that everybody might know that this is not her baby. She is ride or die with the lie that she's come in with. She calls him mean. She calls him selfish for doing this. And this is when Masilicus, he sort of takes out the wineskin and he says, well, this belongs to a priestess. And right on cue, a priestess called Critilla. Yes, Critylla is her name. There we go. Memory is serving me. He throws the wineskin at Critilla. She catches it. And even she refers to the wineskin as the baby. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. They're all impeccable actresses. I love that. I want to go to this festival. This is amazing. Not the real festival, the Aristophanes version of the festival. This is fabulous. Mika is so annoyed that this happened to her baby, that she tells Critilla it's now her job to guard Masilicus because Micah, is going to go and find Cleisthenes so that they can also inform the council of this incident, right? So she's had enough. Mika and the maids go off stage. And this is really the time when Masilicus realizes not only does he have to get out, but that he is royally fucked, right? He is in a lot of trouble. These women are not letting up. They're obviously committing to their act. They're going to tell Cleisthenes, he's going to tell the council. He was already in trouble for breaking in, but now with this whole, he's like, this is going from bad to worse. I need to contact Euripides. Because remember, he had made Euripides promise that if he needed help, he would contact him and he would show up, right? So we've already made this oath, which means that he's got to think of a way to contact this man who's outside of the Thesmophoria. What is he going to do? There are no mobile phones in this time period. And this is where Aristophanes decides to make fun of tragedy even more. That is mostly what he's making fun of in this play, but this is really where he like hunkers down. And he has Masilicus look around the temple that they're sitting in, and he notices that he notices that there are all of these wooden boards that are around the temple. So Masilochus is going to take them off the wall and he's going to write letters into them. As he does this, he is singing as he works. And then he scatters them all over the temple in order to contact Euripides, which obviously doesn't work, right? He wants them to fly away to Euripides and they just kind of like flop onto the stage. This is like a plot device that would have been used in tragedy, and it works in tragedy and silly mythological stories, but obviously in comedy when he's like, fly away, tell Euripides, and they just smack bang on the stage. This would have been brilliant. But he doesn't let this deter him, because again, we're making fun of tragedy. And so he sits down, he's really eager, and he's like looking out for Euripides, like, ooh, is it working? Is he gonna come? When is he gonna show up? And as he waits, this is when the chorus step forward to deliver a very long song, but it's really feminist for the time. Again, whenever I say in any of these videos that something is really feminist, we need to bear in mind the scope with which it is being said, but this is a great speech, okay? Essentially what they do is they sit down and they say, there are all of these great men that you guys want to reference, but all of these women who also did very similar things. So they bring up all of these examples. I mean, this is classic point quote analysis. I mean, they are really here, okay? The women are here to give you an argument, and boy, do they. I am not going to go into every single person or any of the people that they're talking about, because we'll be here for a very long time. But you should definitely go and read this speech, because they just match up all of these great deeds that men claim men do. And they say that women have also done these things. And they name the women, they tell us the time period, they tell us the story, all of this kind of, chef kiss. But once they finish their magnificent speech, we cut back to the action, which still has Masilochus sitting down being guarded by Cratilla, and still no Euripides. And so Masilochus decides that the way he's going to lure the tragedian is by pretending to be people from his plays that needed rescuing, and maybe that will like summon him. And so because he's wearing a yellow dress, he decides that he's going to act as Helen. So Masilochus starts saying the lines from Euripides' Helen, right? He starts saying all of these things, and Cratilla is like mightily confused. She's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I'm Helen, I am the blah, blah. Obviously, Cratilla is like, no, you're not. You're a guy that broke into the Thesmophoria. And he's like, no, I'm not at the Thesmophoria. I'm actually here in Egypt. And she's like, you're not in Egypt. You're in Athens. Like, it's this very funny scene where Cratilla is trying to be like, what is happening right now? And Masilochus is completely embodying the character, because he is convinced that this will summon Euripides to him. He's calling out to the guy that wrote the words that he's saying. And bang! You guys, this works, okay? Euripides like jumps on stage and he's like, hello, I am Menelaus. And so they start speaking to each other as Helen and Menelaus from Euripides' play. And Cratilla is now like, oh, Menelaus, no. He's crazy. The guy who's pretending to be Helen, he's actually pretending to be the Thesmophoria. She is trying to explain this to everyone, which makes this whole thing even funnier. The pair of dummies are on stage reenacting Helen, and this allows them to get close enough so that Masilochus can kind of say an aside to Euripides. And he's like, hey man, get me out of here. And Euripides says, don't worry, I have loads of ideas up my sleeve, but we need to pick the perfect trick in order to get these women to let you out, essentially, because the Helen scene isn't working on Cratilla. Euripides runs off stage to come up with another trick. Masilochus is left on his own. We then have a magistrate along with a Scythian archer, right? That's what he's noted as, but a better way of describing that as like a Scythian officer comes on stage. So the Scythian will be the guard, and the magistrate is obviously coming to talk because Cleisthenes has gone to them and filled them in on everything. Now, it's important, just a little bit of context about a Scythian. This, just for the purpose of this episode, you just need to know, if you're coming to this with no knowledge of the ancient world, that a Scythian would have just been a foreigner to the Athenians. And at this time, they would have seen anybody who was an Athenian as a barbarian. And so that is going to be the subject of all of the jokes regarding the Scythian from this point to the end of the play. So, The magistrate tells all the women why they are there because of Cleisthenes, and then tells them that he is going to have the Scythian take care of Masilochus. So Cratilla can basically relax now. So he tells the Scythian to go over to Masilochus to have him stand up and to bring him to tie him up to a plank, a literal plank. That is the plan. He also adds on to this that if anyone is to come up to Masilochus to try and talk to him so they can see if there are any conspirators within the Thesmophoria, that he gives permission for this Scythian to whip them. Right, so there's that. As the Scythian is picking up Masilochus, is dragging him to tie him up to this plank, Masilochus asks the magistrate and the Scythian if they can offer him one last favor. Now, obviously, the magistrate is like, okay, well, let's hear it first before we say yes or no. We need to decide if this is reasonable. And Masilochus asks that if they are going to kill him, could they at least strip him of his clothing? Because remember, in ancient Greece, this would have been seen as really shameful for him to be dressed up as a woman. This is like not a thing that a manly man, not necessarily, because obviously they're all men dressed up as women anyway. So everybody who's acting out the Thesmophoria is a man that is on stage. That is key to why this play is also funny. But he says this is really shameful for like a manly man to be doing, and I don't want to be like the last sight of me to be of me as a woman. I want to be seen as the man that I am. And the magistrate is like, no. Just completely ignores him and says that actually he should die as is, so that way everyone can see what a bad egg he is. You know, like, absolutely not. You have made your bed, lie in it. Masilochus is led to go and be tied to the plank, which then is the perfect opportunity for the magistrate to also leave the stage, as well as Cratilla. So everybody leaves the stage is what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I didn't say that. That would have just been easier. But everyone leaves the stage and they leave the chorus alone to sing and dance. They have a long song where they pray up to all the gods, but the final dance is to Dionysus. They sing and do that for him and they're like, woo, party. But this song ultimately is broken up by shouts and screams, and we have the Scythian and Masilochus run on. Well, the Scythian runs on as he's holding Masilochus, who is attached to a plank as of now. The chorus move back as he comes up to one of the columns that is in the temple, and he places the plank against it. So Masilochus can look out, but it's silly. He puts this plank down and the Scythian starts speaking, and like I said, this is their time to make fun of quote unquote barbarians, right? We have to bear in mind the ancient Greek audience. So the Scythian speaks in very broken Greek. Like it's really jarring, and it's supposed to be funny. So from literally this point until the end, we just have him speaking in very bizarre Greek, attempting to communicate, and everybody kind of poking fun at the words that he's using. There are lots of play on words in the ancient Greek, which makes it a silly with that word, a very silly scene, but just bear that in mind. So the pair of them are chatting back and forth, the accent's getting made fun of, and at some point in the conversation, we have the Scythian who goes off stage to go and get a mat. And when he goes off stage, this is the perfect time for Euripides to show back up, because he's thought of a trick that is going to work on all of the women. Now, they don't have the women as the audience though, they have a Scythian. So when he shows up with his trick, we already know a fat load of use this is gonna be. However, he comes on and he is dressed as Perseus. And he makes his like opening speech, and Masilochus clocks on and is like, holy fuck, he wants me to play Andromeda, because he's tied up to a plank like Andromeda was tied up to the rock. If you don't know this myth, if you don't know this play, this is going to sound really weird, but it's funny, it makes sense. We then have one of the most chaotic scenes I think I've ever read, like genuinely, because we have the two of them. We have really Masilochus start off by playing Andromeda. We then have Echo, like the mythological character of Echo is then on stage as well. Like a woman comes on and pretends to be Echo, which means that when the Scythian returns, we then have Echo who's off stage, which bear in mind, okay, well, she's in the back of the stage. She starts off stage and then she comes behind the pillar that, Masilochus is on. So initially Masilochus starts saying his lines and Echo starts echoing them. And Masilochus and Echo get really annoyed. Masilochus gets really annoyed at Echo because all Echo can do is echo what Masilochus is saying, to the point where Masilochus is kind of like, let's fight. And Echo's like, let's fight. And then we have the Scythian come back on. And so then when the Scythian shows up, Echo starts echoing the Scythian. I mean, it is literal verbal mayhem. There's so much going on, but nothing really is said. It's just a lot is being said. And initially, because the Scythian can't see Echo, the Scythian thinks that it's Masilicus who is doing the echoing, and so therefore he initially starts threatening Masilicus and is like, why don't we take this outside? And Masilicus is like, no, wait, it's not me, please don't take me outside. Now, something that I forgot to mention was right before Echo comes on, Euripides, they had a little back and forth, right? Where he is like, I am Perseus, you're Andromeda, play the part. And then he dips out, and that's when Echo comes on, okay? So I probably should have made that make a little bit more context, but that's how that looks. So you've then got the three of them, the Scythian, Echo, and Masilicus on stage together. Euripides is off stage at this point. And then Echo, when this whole threatening thing happens, she starts to run off. And that's when the Scythian sees her, tries to lunge for her, but she gets off stage just quickly enough. So he's really annoyed that this has happened. And right when she leaves, Euripides re-enters the stage. Aerially? Yeah, he is strapped to this contraption that has him come down because remember, he's dressed as Perseus and he is kitted out, you guys. He's got the little wings on his sandals. He's got the Gorgon head, everything. He is really leaning in to this role. So he comes in via the air and lands next to Masilicus as they are saying the lines of Perseus and Andromeda back to one another, which leaves the Scythian not only the language barrier, which is confusing, but also just the context of what's happening confuses the bejesus out of this man. Now, it's because of this that Euripides realizes that his trick, his plan to free Masilicus by playing these roles and confusing people enough to let Masilicus go isn't going to work on the Scythian because he cannot understand really what they're saying, but also he doesn't know the context of this. And so therefore Euripides is like, fuck. We're going to have to start from ground zero again, my friend. So mid-scene, he leaves to go and construct a better plan. He's like, mate, wait up for me. I'll be back with something that's going to work for the Scythian. And he dips out again. The Scythian glares at Masilicus, confused by Euripides is leaving, but like doesn't ask any questions, and he settles down to sleep. So when he settles down to sleep, this is when the chorus come on and they sing again. They sing one hymn to Persephone and Demeter, and then they sing one hymn to Pallas Athena, in case you wanted to know. And the Scythian is still asleep when Euripides reappears on stage after the chorus have finished. This allows Euripides to conspiratorially go up to the chorus and strike a deal with them. And he basically says, if you agree to release Masilicus with this plan that I'm about to do, I will not say a bad word about women ever again. And the chorus agree, but the leader really does make it clear that they are not going to physically step in, and so therefore it's Euripides' job to deal with the Scythian because the Scythian's like a big guy. And they're like, even though we agree with this, we are too little, we are too small, we are not handling this. We will just help if need be, and we will let Masilicus go. Euripides is like, leave it to me, ladies. And he puts on a disguise of an old woman and he brings on a dancing girl. He brings the dancing girl into the middle of the stage and then he calls down to the orchestra to ask, like the actual musicians, not the, obviously the part of the play, but like the actual musicians, and he asks the piper to play a tune for them. So the piper does, and the dancing girl does a little dance. And as she's doing this dance, the Scythian wakes up and he is all heart eyes for this girl. He is obsessed immediately with the dancer girl, just all eyes on her. And Euripides notices this, and very long scene short, he has this girl go and sit on the Scythian's lap, go and like flirt with him a bit, puts all these ideas into the Scythian's head, which is like, you should go off stage and have some private time and get to know her better. And the Scythian is just literally like tongue lolling, is like, absolutely say less. They go off stage at one point to go and like, again, I can't be too specific on here. I feel like I've been way too specific and my other Oedipus videos are already getting censored. So you know what's happening off stage, which gives Euripides enough time to free Masilicus and for them to run. They book it. Meaning that when the Scythian returns with the dancing girl, because it doesn't last long. This is not only a commentary for the Athenian audience on men, but also on particularly foreign men. Let's just put an asterisk there, that is a big part of this joke. But anyways, when the Scythian comes on, he looks to the chorus and he's like, where did they go? Like, where did this old lady go that was in charge of this dancing girl? I'm confused. And the chorus specifically direct him in the wrong direction. So the way that Euripides and Masilochus went off, the chorus turned the other way and they say, oh, they went that way. But as the Scythian is running that way, they then say, oh, no, I'm wrong. Sorry, he went off the other way. And they basically send him running around the stage in this ridiculous way. And that is how the play ends. Obviously, the chorus do sing over top of the Scythian running around. So we have this like nice end to the play. And the messaging at the end of it is actually more so a case of like compromise and working together is how we can move forward, as opposed to being constantly like opposed to one another. But still, that is the end of Women at the Thesmophoria. This is definitely an underrated play. I know that Liv from Let's Talk About Miss Baby has a load of episodes about this play because she absolutely loves it. So I've linked those in the description below in case you want more analysis along with the play. But that is a very basic summary and introduction in case you guys are reading it in your own time, or maybe like me, you are doing this for GCSE. This is the play that I read for GCSE and I adored it at the time. So if you are also doing that, then hopefully this will help you for your exams that are coming up. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be seeing you next time with more Aristophanes here on MoAn Inc. I'll see you guys then.